Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Big Game Indicating Dogs Q&A. These Big Game Indicating Dogs Q&As are held from questions from the Big Game Indicating Dogs Inner Circle. And the Big Game Indicating Dogs Inner Circle is a closed Facebook group for people who are following the Deer Dog Training Blueprint. And the Deer Dog Training Blueprint is a 12-part month-by-month video series with everything you need to train your own deer dog. In the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, we just filmed everything I did to train my own dog from start to finish, starting right off with a 8-week-old pup and training it for over 12 months, right through step-by-step, filming absolutely everything I did, breaking it all down, explaining why I'm doing everything, how I'm doing it, going over all my principles and favorite dog training quotes and favorite dog trainers and absolutely everything. It's a 15-hour series in 12 parts, and those 12 parts are broken down into chapters. And you can flick through the chapters, you can go back, find parts that you want to brush up on. And we've got the Big Game Indicating Dogs Inner Circle, which is full of hundreds of people who have followed the Deer Dog Training Blueprint. So everyone's on the same page. Everyone that signs up to the Deer Dog Training Blueprint is allowed into the Big Game Indicating Dogs Inner Circle Facebook page. You can ask questions. All of the people that are in there that have followed the blueprint will help you out. It's actually turning into a really, really cool community of people helping each other along. And then we also have these Q&A posts in there, and people that really want my in-depth opinion on something can ask the questions, and I just go for it in these Q&As. So let's get into it. Sam, hey mate, and a few of these questions are a bit old, and I apologise for that. I keep bloody saying this, but it's just happened again. I've been tapped out, Christmas, all that sort of stuff. Excuses. But I do apologise for a few of these questions been a bit old. And again, if you throw a heap of questions down on the new Q&A post that pops up straight after this, load it up with 5 or 6 questions, I'll hook into it straight away a lot quicker. Really getting the ball rolling for the year again now. Sam, hey mate, got a 1-year-old heading dog. Going good, shot 4 deer with her, spooked a few due to her hunting hard. Range is okay, but moving around side to side, forward and back. Any tips there, or just time and age? So Sam's saying he's got a heading dog, shot 4 deer, everything's going good, but she's hunting hard, moving, swinging side to side. And I know exactly what you mean, man. A dog that's just very keen, hunting hard, within her range, but just too busy, too much movement. And I don't really like that. I really like a dog to work nice and calmly and clean and methodical. And we do go over a lot of this in the blueprint, man. Part 11 and 12. Where Prince doing the exact same thing. He's within range, but he's sort of scrambling over a bit of stuff, and it starts happening once you've shot a few exactly where you are. Shoot 3 or 4 deer over the dog. The penny really drops, and they're like, "Okay, I get it. I see what we're here for," and they absolutely love it, and they just all go. Super enthusiastic, doing everything right, but just too keen, too quick. And it's the same. Come back to that principle: pressure and praise. Put pressure on what you don't want, praise on what you do want. Use the minimum amount of pressure required to get the job done. And I'm going to put pressure on it. It's in there in part 11. I think it's in part 11. 11 or 12. It's actually the part where I've just shot. No, I think I shot 2 deer the night before. And it's either the day after or the day after that. I'm heading out and I end up shooting that Seeker stag, and Prince he's getting a distant wind, and we're just slowly working our way up that gut, And he's just super confident, stoked as, and he just scrambles, like makes way more noise than he has to, getting over this sort of dry wood stuff, and makes a heap of noise. And I just, hey, cut it out. I think I just give him a bit of a touch. Try to do it quietly because I'm hunting, and he's actually indicating, taking me towards something. But it's pressure on what you don't want, praise on what you do want. Every time your dog makes more noise than it has to, oi, cut it out. And you sort of you end up doing that quiet yelling, you're like, Prince. And you can use body language and tone a lot, touch. If it gets really over the top, you can put a long line on them and give them a couple of checks on the long line. But don't be scared to put a bit of pressure on your dog, even when you're hunting, and I think it can be actually a relatively common mistake that people make, that they don't want to correct their dog or put too much pressure on it while it's hunting or while it's trying to take them to game, out of fear that you're going to put your dog off hunting. Where in reality, if on the one hand, it's and that's a huge part of the reason why it's so important to train so well and thoroughly before you start hunting, so things are in very good shape, so you can, to the point where you can carry out your first few hunts with little to no pressure, because you've trained your dog to the point where it's carrying out those first couple of hunts so well, to the point where you don't actually have to put much pressure on it. And it's very, very important. And it's a huge part of getting a dog off to just an absolute rip-roaring start. And you're in you end up in a situation where I was with Print in the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, where he's pretty well hunting pretty damn well, almost as well as he's ever going to, like right off the bat, really. Print's first find, I didn't put a bullet in it, I didn't shoot it. I was sort of mucking around trying to get a shot of it, but Print's first find was a nice sort of sidle find on about a 200 meter find, on his very first deer he ever smelt in the bush. And I've had that more than once with a dog, where its very first find is a 200 or 300 meter find. There's a lot of reading of the dog and handling and training and understanding experience in that, but the blueprint goes over all that stuff. But just to cover that off, because it's sort of the flip side of the coin of what I'm about to get into here, is very, very important to have that training down so good so you don't need to use much pressure on those first couple of hunts. And that's where when people say, it takes years to get a dog going good, or it does, and I've said this many a times before, it does take years if you don't train it thoroughly and you spend your first few hunts putting pressure on the dog to try and you're trying to get the dog to hunt in the way in which you want it to hunt over its first few hunts, because you're basically trying to train it on the job, and you get in here, and you're putting pressure on it, and you're putting it in behind and doing all these things, rather than having it all set up so you're actually doing more encouraging. There you go, walk forward, yeah, good dog, and you're like encouraging the dog right up to the point where you shoot your first deer, and you've done all your scent work, you've done your introduction to gunfire, so the gunfire isn't too much for it, you've done your obstacle work, you've done your introduction to bush and water and everything, so the dog can just take everything in its stride, do everything properly, and shoot those first couple of deer under those circumstances. And you do often, it works so bloody well, by the time you've shot 4 deer over it, you end up in the situation that Sam's in here, and you've got a dog that's going real well and absolutely cranking, and it's too keen, and its confidence goes the other way, and its confidence goes up. But now, because you've shot 3 or 4 deer over that dog, doing everything correctly, man, not that you ever would, But this is just, you would struggle to beat it out of that dog now. You know, that just, you would. You know, it's like a pig hunter whose dog starts catching goats. Once it's started, or a pig hunter whose dog started catching deer, you know, I absolutely cringe at this sort of thing. But the old school, there's plenty of old school guys that would beat the hell out of their dogs for catching goats or deer, and it doesn't work, man. You know, because once the ball's rolling, it's hard to get them out of it. So, and I'm obviously definitely not telling you to do that, and you don't need to. I'm just saying, using it as an example, all you've got to do here, man, is start putting a bit of pressure on it, like with what I did with Print. And it's just if you train your dog properly and thoroughly, and it's within range and everything, just under the breath, when they're making too much noise, scrambling over something, cut it out. You know, call them back and Print, settle down. You know, when they're making too much noise. And then when pressure on what you don't want, praise on what you do want, and you're always using the minimum amount of pressure or praise to get the job done. Put a bit of pressure on the dog when it's moving too much and it's getting overexcited. And the flip side of that, you know, and again, this is all covered in detail in the blueprint, including like actual video demonstration of Print getting too keen on the hunt and I'm putting pressure on him. And it's not, I'm not hurting him. I don't think I even touch him. It's just Print, cut it out. It may be like, I'm talking a touch for people who are watching the video. It's like if my hand here is the dog, I'm like, Print, cut it out. Like that. And he's like, oh shit, sorry. And then as he relaxes and goes slow again, then I'm trying to pick a time when he is going nice and quietly and nice and close, and I want to say, good boy, nice and quiet, good boy, and give him a pat. I want him to be doing that face up, facing away from me, with his bum towards me, nice and quiet, and I want to be able to pat him on the bum with him still hunting. So he's still looking forward through the bush, still doing his job, looking for the deer, even indicating, and I want to be able to walk right up behind him and pat him on the bum. Good boy. Because that's pressure, that's praise on what I do want. Again, I was just talking about this in a Palmico Q&A about how anytime we're putting pressure on the dog, we're trying to direct them away from a negative behavior. We're always trying to give them that option of what we do. Because if you just go, Print, he's like, just like, shit, I don't know. Quite often when you're doing that, the dog just doesn't know what to do. And you can even be in a situation with a dog that's pushing its range, and you can only really put pressure on it quietly or touch it or put pressure on it when it's close. And you sort of have to catch up with the dog to tell it off and go, slow down, you're going too far. And then the dog's just standing there looking at you going, sorry, I don't know, I know you're mad, but I don't really. And then you go, give you a go command, and they sort of blast off because they don't know. All they know is that they're close to you and that you're blasting them, and they don't know what's going on. So you've really got to be careful with it. And this is where it comes back to just putting that long line on, because at least with that long line, when the dog pulls away, that's when you can give it a little check. And when it comes back close to you, good dog. You can roll on that praise. So in all of this is a part of why I like a dog to start off hunting so close. Even if I'm going to let it stretch out a little bit later on, you can let it stretch out as long as you want later on, if you want to. But I want the dog close, particularly early on, so I can do all these things. And I want the dog to be within 2 or 3 meters when it first makes more noise than have to. So I can say, Print! Like right while he's making the noise, you know? And you do that at good timing and keeping that stuff in mind, that you're not sending the wrong messages and confusing the dog, and that you're also that you're hitting that unwanted behavior right on the head with good timing and the minimum amount of pressure required to get the job done. And then you're balancing that out with praise at the right time and letting the dog know, this is what I want you to do, good boy or good girl. That's my take on that. And otherwise, the final fallback is the long line, man, and that's all shown. And at the end of part 12 of the blueprint, we had got that half-hour add-on there, all on that. Patrick, hi Paul. I have a 7.5-month-old border terrier going well and everything, but when on the beach, park, or even spots another dog in the van, he'll start whining and shaking with excitement. On the beach, he'll pull away constantly. If another dog spotted, shows zero aggression but just wants to play. Have been ignoring other people and dogs. When he breaks range, we'll turn only to find another dog coming from another direction. When we're up in the hills or in the bush, he's really good. Other dogs equals peahead. So I'm guessing he's just been, fried out, absolute idiot when there's another dog around. What's your thoughts on doggy kindies for socializing? Not necessarily that good and can quite potentially make them even worse, because a lot of the stuff that they do at doggy daycare is just let all the dogs out in the area to go hard out, and it can even make it worse. Could potentially make it better in certain cases, but it's fairly unlikely, and it's far more likely to make it way worse. Eleanor's saying she's having the same problem. And hey, I've had the same problem with Print. Every dog has something, eh? What's Miko's thing? Miko doesn't really care that much about other dogs, to be honest. And we're on the beach or whatever, sees another dog or whatever, Miko's actually birds. Birds are Miko's thing. Super freaking intense around birds. Sort of talked about it in the Palmiko Dog Guide. We actually have more to cover off on that in the last couple of videos that we're going to make with Miko very shortly. But birds are Miko's thing. Dogs are Print's thing, and they always have been. And it's just one of those things. And that's one of the big things with an indicating dog. Big game indicating dog that you're hunting in the bush. And that's why I say it's really good to do your first few hunts on your own, just you and your dog. The bush is actually often a pretty low distraction environment, especially when you're talking about other dogs and people and traffic and those really big distractions. We go over the non-target species aversion training, so you can knock the sharp edges off, all that sort of stuff. We do all the scent work for deer, and it's actually pretty good environment. And the whole blueprint is geared towards training a dog to be bang on in that environment, and that's the environment we need them to be bang on in. This sort of thing, man, when you're talking about you're out in a park, when you said when you're walking and your dog breaks range because of another dog coming, you often turn away from it, and there's just another dog coming in another direction. So you're obviously in an area with lots of dogs, and it's just freaking difficult. It just is. And it's one of those things, I live here in Papamoa, and it's just got so much busier, even over in the 3 or so years that I've been here. I can't really go anywhere around here without just running headlong into other dogs. And so often they are just completely off leash and just bowling straight in, to the point I've been walking with my dog on a leash, and another dog's literally just come around the corner, completely off leash, right up, and all but attacked my dogs. I had that with Miko. This dog just come up, completely off leash, running. I had Miko on a leash. It ran right up to us, strutted right up to Miko, froze right in her face, and then just like basically attacked her. This little dog. Stuff like that's probably why Miko isn't hugely interested in running up to other dogs. But Print is. And what that has meant for me is I've just had to fall back on all of the proper principles and fallbacks that are all in the Deer Dog Training Blueprint. Long lines, change of direction, pressure on what you don't want, praise on what you do want. And when you're in those difficult situations, you'll find yourself just constantly using that stuff. Pressure, long line, change of direction, turn around, there's another dog coming the other way. Turn back around again. Just put your dog on a stop. Just tell your dog to sit, do a stop drill right there until the other dogs walk past, and then you keep going. It's in certain situations, it's just plain not easy. And you'll find yourself just going backwards and forwards, around and around in circles, just dealing with it the best you can, and just stick to the plan and the routine. And as long as you do that, and you stick to the plan and the routine, and you just let time pass and let your dog age, and you don't make big mistakes, try to get into situations where you can work as constructively as you can without too much time spent in those ridiculous sort of situations where you turn and then you turn again, and then you turn again, and then you're just going round and round in circles, and then you just like stop right on the spot, and you're like, oh man, I can't really do anything here. And then the other dog's just coming in off leash, and you're just like, holy shit. It'll happen. As long as you handle those situations damn near perfectly, which it's pretty basic stuff, have it on a long line, change direction, pressure on what you don't want, praise on what you do want, and you do it all correctly, sometimes a certain amount of those situations is actually good because you're desensitizing your dog. It's distraction on the stop, training your dog, impulse control, all of that sort of stuff. You don't want to keep your dog completely sheltered the whole time, and in the blueprint, I actually show how I actually go out of my way to take Print to more crowded places and deal with that sort of distraction and socialization, all of that. But you don't want to be in those sort of situations the whole time, and you may have to go out of your way to get into some situations where you can work in a calm, constructive way with your dog. But know that, at 7.5 months old, if you're really good with everything that I just said, it'll improve massively. But in saying that, Print's 3 or 4 years old now, 4 years old. He's still kind of a dick sometimes around other dogs. It's just his thing. Miko's a dick with birds. Every dog's got something. Fly had a couple of things. Every dog's got something, man. No dog's perfect. You've just got to work on being the best handler that you can, and staying on top of it, and it'll get better and better, and everything's manageable unless you're being really silly about the situations that you're constantly getting into with your dog. Hope that answers that. Again, any of these questions, feel free to ask again. Give us feedback on it. You know what I'm saying. Ask again. Let us know. Keep us posted. Ask another question. I can cover it again from a just different angle. If I missed something, let me know. Ryan. I think we've talked about this before, but hi, Paul. I'm doing some non-target species aversion training with my 11-month-old GSP. She's solid as a rock. Big call, mate. She's solid as a rock and shows little to no interest in a dead rabbit. That's good. But will still actively stalk and point live ones while walking on our property. Okay, I've already read this question, but hang on, I'll cover it and I may have to go back. I'm giving her a command of disapproval once I'm sure it is a rabbit she's locking onto. But is there anything else I can do? Or do you think this might stop once I start shooting deer over her? I really don't want to trek 1,000,000 miles through the bush to find she's led me to a rabbit. I guarantee you won't trek 1,000,000 miles. And even with a dog that does take you to game like small game like possums and rabbits and things like that, even though we cover how to avoid that with non-target species aversion training in the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, even if you don't, in the past with dogs that didn't do any of that sort of stuff, you only ever find that a dog would take you 20 or 40 meters to a possum and you go, get out of it and walk away. It's just not a huge issue, man. As long as your dog isn't breaking and chasing stuff, your dog indicating and taking you to non-target game isn't a massive deal, provided you don't start shooting it later on, and it will sort itself out pretty easily. Going back to what you said though, and there's some really important points and huge fundamentals to dog training and hunting dog training and scent training and target specific stuff and the type of areas and how to handle this stuff. It's a really good one for everyone. You're saying she's still actively stalking and pointing live ones while walking on our property. I'm giving her a command of disapproval once I'm sure it is a rabbit. What do you think that she may be stalking that isn't a rabbit that you want to let her stalk? That would be my question to you. And this is why it's so important to train a deer dog in an area where there are no deer. This question comes up later on. It's different if there's like a deer farm next to you or something, but you would definitely do not want to train a deer dog in, say, a wooded area with wild deer running around. And the reason why that's so important is exactly what Ryan's dealing with here, and that his dog is starting to stalk and point rabbits, and why it's so important to be doing this work in an area where there are no deer is so when that stuff happens, see, if I was at where all the training I did with Print in the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, there's no deer in that area. It's all paddocks. There's no deer in there. So anything the dog starts tracking or hunting or stalking or pointing is non-target species. So if I start to get into a problem where my dog is tracking and pointing and stalking when I haven't laid a scent with skin, then as soon as his nose goes down, I just go, cut it, get out of it. And we have our routine, our route that we walk every time. So it's really a problem you shouldn't be having. You know, if you're in an area with no deer, and let me know if there are deer in that area, and we can sort of maybe try to talk about this from a different perspective. But you're saying, I'm giving her a command of disapproval once I'm sure it is a rabbit. So that tells me that you're letting your dog track, stalk, and point rabbits right up into the point where you see it, which will generally be the point in which the dog sees it, And to the dog, that's a pretty good conclusion to the hunt. And you're basically teaching it to hunt rabbits doing that. And, if we were really serious about it, if we wanted to go talk about some super, super serious versions of old school gun dog training, bird dog training, you're talking about the sort of stuff, gamekeepers, full-time professional dog trainers, that's all they do. And, working on estates in England or something. And they wouldn't let a dog out into an area to do retrieves or anything. They'd take an older properly trained dogs through that area to make sure there's not a bird or a rabbit or a duck or a pheasant or a frickin' mouse or a rat. They don't want anything in there. You only train in areas devoid of game. And you only train in those sorts of areas right up until, and then they do their work with pigeons and wings and different, and it's just this full-on super elaborate process. We don't go anywhere near that far in the deer dog training blueprint. We try to keep it a lot more simple than that, but that is still a really important part of it, that we're doing our training in an area where there's no deer. When we are introducing the scent of deer, we're doing it in that controlled and structured way with skin. And we're laying those, the first track starts out with that super short track. We're aware of which way the wind is. We're aware of all these different things, and we're setting the dog up to succeed and just nail it. And a huge part of the reason we're doing all of that is so we know what's going on the whole time. So if the dog starts tracking or stalking or pointing something, you just so that's I think I've hammered it out, but that's all the key points on that, man. If there's no deer there and your dog starts tracking something, don't let it even track anything other than a deer skin scent that you've set up, and you won't have a problem. And even if for whatever reason you still have the occasional problem with something like that, Prince still has occasionally shown the odd little bit of interest in a possum here or there when it's like 10 meters away and we have a little bit of a wind. He knows he's not really meant to, because I've never shot one. Every time he's done it, I've gone, get out of it, when he's like walked 10 meters over to the log and stuck his nose in a side of dead log, and it's obviously there's not a deer in there. And I say, get out of it, and he carries on. Just last night we were walking along a track, and just before dark, and he put his nose down the track for about 10 meters and turned off and was looking all full on into the bush, and next thing there's a possum crashing around the tree like 2 meters away from our head. Again, and I talk about this in the blueprint, you got to make sure that there's not a deer standing behind that possum, because I've been there, done that too. And you go, cut it out, and the deer goes running off, and your dog was actually pointing a deer. But you get what I'm saying. It's not a huge deal anyway, as long as you don't do a whole bunch of stuff wrong and let it turn into a big deal. Lisa. Hi Paul, we have an 8-week-old Springer Spaniel, just started your training with kenneling and come command. She's super noisy in the kennel, so we are working through that, but just wondering if you have any tips for this. We try and go out when she's quiet, but how often would you go out without overdoing it? This question sort of goes on, but I'll address that first. How often would you go out without overdoing it, or not going out enough that she doesn't know whether to be noisy or quiet? Yeah, I get what you're saying. So what Lisa's referring to there is basically in early stages of crate training, kennel training, separation training. We're really trying to get the pup or dog tired, keep it busy for quite a while, get it to a point where we know it's ready to relax, have a sleep. We're giving it food, water, making sure it's gone to the bathroom, everything. So it's all fully sorted and comfortable. And all there is to do is for it to fall asleep, and then we lock it up and walk away. And then when we walk away, we don't want to go back to the pup while it's making noise. If it goes quiet and relaxes, we don't want to wait too long so it starts making noise again. So until we get in a situation where we have to go back to the pup and let it out while it's making noise, because that is training our pup or dog to make noise to be let out. So the key is perfect case scenario, first time we put a pup in the kennel is get it tired, fed, watered, gone to the bathroom, all that sort of stuff, warm and cozy, put it in there, walk away. It barks and howls and whines for 10 or 15 minutes, settles down, goes to sleep. We leave it for as long as we dare. As long as you dare, the longer the better. Maybe give it half an hour, an hour. And then we want to go back to it while it's quiet. And then you basically want to sneak up to the kennel while it's asleep. And you almost want like opening the kennel to wake the pup up. And good pup. Let it out. Good dog, good girl, good boy. Let it out. Spend some time with it. Keep it busy again, wear it out, and then back in the kennel. And it's probably, if it's first day away from its family, first time crate or kennel training, it's probably going to bark and whine again for a while. And you don't go back while it's barking or whining. And then once it's quiet, you go back and let it out and give it some praise and engagement. So you're teaching the pup that the way to get let out is to be quiet. While you bark and whine, you're not going to be let out. If anything, barking and whining is going to get a little bit of pressure. And Lisa's saying, we try to go out when she's quiet, but how often would you go out without overdoing it? I would say, again, it's one of those things, the minimum amount of pressure and praise to get the job done. Here, you want to leave it as long as you can without the pup or dog starting up again. It's not the absolute end of the world if it does start up again, what you're like, damn, I left it too long and it starts up again. Try to leave it until it goes quiet again, and as soon as it goes quiet, wait like 1 or 2 minutes and get out there while it's quiet, and let it out. But you know what I'm saying, it's wait as long as you can. You're trying to, and generally, if everything's going well, you're doing everything correctly, the time that the pup barks and whines should get shorter and shorter, and the time that it's quiet for before it starts up again should get longer and longer, roughly speaking. You might have the odd time when it really arcs up and goes for longer, and you might have a time when it starts whining again pretty quickly. Those sorts of things will usually come through things like it's hungry again, or it's got a little bit cold because the wind's kicked up, or it needs to go to the bathroom sooner, or it's got too much energy. It's been in the kennel all night. It's only had a quick walk in the morning. It's gone back. It's slept all night. Had a quick run in the morning. It's slept all morning. And then it's lunchtime. It's like it's done all the sleeping it can do, and it's awake and it's ready to do stuff. That's the other big thing. And when you really run into problems with this with a young pup and you're not making progress and things are almost getting worse, it's like making more and more noise in the kennel. I say to people, try to pick the weekend, hold on to the weekend, and then just get up early and keep that pup busy moving all day. And so it's tired when it goes back into the kennel. And again, if you're busy and you're working and you've got a busy lifestyle and the pup's young, it's not easy. But again, if you do the best you can and stick to the program, stick to those principles, sort of hold fast and stick to it, it will get better over time. And it's way, way worth it, because if you sort of button off on any of this stuff and it goes more and more pear-shaped, it gets harder and harder, and it can get really difficult later on the track. If you stick to it and stay disciplined with it, you'll slowly make progress. You'll finally work your way through it, and within a few months or a year, you'll be sorted, and then it's sorted for the rest of the dog's life, and it's way worth it. Polder. I think that's how I say your name. Hi Paul, Patu is 18 months old, heading dog. We've completed the blueprint. We went for our first hunt on the weekend. We walked down an old sunlit 6 foot wide track which had open native bush on both sides. Patu would freeze and indicate at a place where a deer had obviously crossed the track. He very tentatively crept into the bush for 2 or 3 meters and then hastily sprinted out of the bush and proceeded to walk along the track. He did this several times, and it's as if he's scared of the bush or scared of the deer. A couple of times I led him back into where he'd just exited from, and he casts wide in all directions and then stops and stares at me as if he doesn't understand where to from here or ultimately what his purpose is. I assume that he's just unsure and lacking confidence and will work it out for himself, and then he'll be away. Or should I be applying pressure? Thanks for everything. So this is why we do, there's a few things here. That sort of behavior is pretty standard for a dog that if you don't do your plenty of introduction to bushwork like we do in the blueprint, if you don't do plenty of scent work like we do in the blueprint, if you don't do plenty of introduction to cows like and big animals like we do in the blueprint, if you don't do your obstacle training, all that sort of, if you just have a dog sort of hangs around the house for 8 or 10 months and you're like, let's go out in the bush, they'll do a lot of that sort of stuff. And there's all this weird crap going on. Sort of like what I was talking about earlier. You spend your first good few hunts like, don't do this, don't do that, get over here, get in there, get over, get back, get forward, and you're just constantly bossing your dog around because it has no freaking idea what's going on. And there's all this pressure and shit. And by the time you've shot your first few deer over your dog, often more by chance and more by you dragging the dog around and shooting a deer and trying to show your dog, hey, this is what we're supposed to be doing. And you spend years trying to unravel all of that damage you've done on those first few hunts. And you've usually started a few terrible bad habits, and you have a dog that ends up being nowhere near as good as it could be had you trained it properly. Now, I'm not saying you've done that. I know that you have done a lot of work with Patu, and I'm pretty sure you've had her on the blueprint right from the start. But I would be interested in how much of that stuff you've done, how much of that introduction to bushwork you've done, how much scent work you've done, how much did you get her around cows and all that sort of thing, so she's at least semi-comfortable and confident with the idea of being around bigger animals, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. There's that. But if you have done plenty of all of that sort of stuff, and for whatever reason you just got a really tentative dog or something, for whatever reason that's how she's acting, I'd be very careful with pressure in a situation like that with a dog that's being uncertain. Be very careful with pressure. And if a dog is really struggling with it, man, I hate starting a dog off in behind. I really do. But man, we've had hundreds of people put dogs through the blueprint. I think I've had it definitely once before where someone said they've done all the stuff and they're taking the dog hunting and we're just struggling, man. She's not confident. She's not very uncertain, and she's leading us around in circles and I don't know what the hell's going on. I said, look, if you've done everything correctly enough in the blueprint and you've ticked all those boxes and your dog was confident in the bush, following that scent well, you've got your range, control, introduction to gunfight, all of that stuff sorted, and for whatever reason that individual dog is still struggling with the whole thing in the bush, I'd say release, get all that pressure off, no pressure, plenty of praise and encouragement, but instead of putting the dog in front and come on, away you go, hurry up, let's go, where's the deer, and that pressure, put the dog in behind and just hunt and just shoot some deer. And that's what I'd do, man. I'd get that dog in behind, keep it nice and light, and positive, and shoot a deer. Again, we've got all that stuff's there in the blueprint in part 11 and 12, how to handle approaching your first couple of deer super, super slow, letting the dog take its time, approach, calm, but praise, it's positive. And getting the dog used to it and just let the dog really take its time and click. And I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying that 100%, like 1,000,000 out of 1,000,000 dogs, if you do everything perfect with everyone's going to just be perfect. Surely somewhere along the way there's going to be some dog that's just like, no matter what you do, they're just not all about it. But it's extremely rare, man. Very, 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 very rare. That if you do everything correctly, and even if it's very, very, very rare that you would get in a situation that you've done everything correctly enough. But I mean that, yeah, just not just once or twice in the bush, not just, oh yeah, seen a cow now, that's done. It's go back a few times until the dog's real comfortable with it, you know. It's really, really rare that you do all of that properly enough and you have to put the dog in behind to just shoot its first couple of deer and just show the dog what's going on. But if you do end up in a situation like that, that's what I would recommend you do. And if you're in the situation with this dog, you've done all that other stuff, I would say, you know, even something like, instead of bush stalking, try to go to a spot where you can see a deer at a distance. You can shoot it and you can take your dog over and the dog sees the dead deer on the ground. Give it a bone to chew on, give it a couple of offcuts, be really careful with it, take its time, take a couple of bones home and a bit of skin, give it to your dog in the kennel, go do that once, 2 or 3 times, just let the dog slowly warm into it, and they really, really should get into it, man. I'll be gutted for you if it doesn't. If you've done everything right and you do all of that, you just can't get it going. That'd be really, really rare and unfortunate. But yeah, that's all I can say on that. Another thing that was in the back of my mind while I was saying that was, the situation with pigs is very common. Where you have a dog that's very, very keen on deer, a lot of drive on deer, super confident on deer, but the first couple of pigs, they're like, oh shit, I don't know about this. And Fly was like that, very uncertain with pigs. And as soon as I shot a couple, the tables turn and the dog goes, oh, okay, hang on. If we get up on these things and the boss makes that big bang with that thing that he's carrying, the gun, and these things fall over and they die and we eat them, they start to go, yeah, all right. And they gain that confidence and that drive, and they learn how the whole thing works, and they become the predator, you know. That can be a huge part of it, man. Once the dog realizes that we are out there to kill that animal that they're smelling and wary of, not that the animal could kill them, that can be a huge part of the puzzle. So just trying to keep the pressure off it, trying to keep it positive, and just getting that dog in that situation where it can just see that, hey, we're here to kill these things and we can kill them, is huge. And sometimes it can be difficult with a dog that's not hunting well. It can be difficult to do it in the bush, and you've got to get the dog up close, and it can be pretty intense and full on for a dog that's unsure like that, and that slightly longer range style of hunting, watching a clearing or river or slips or something, where you can just shoot the deer. It's dead, it's on the ground, you sort of know where it's fallen, and you can take the dog over there, and the dog could smell it, you know it's dead, and you can just take your time moving in on it. Can be a really good way of doing it. Let us know how you get on, man. Taryn, hi, we have a 18-month-old heading dog that has finished the blueprint. From day one, Strider has been scared and nervous about everything and anything From day one, Strider has been scared and nervous about everything and anything. We have done lots of training to get him over lots of things. So this is actually very similar to the last question. We have struggled to get him hunting and interested in deer at every step. He always seems like he can't wait for it all to be over when we go out, and continuously tracks us back to the ute. We have started leading the hunts so to stop going in circles, so he can get the idea of it all. We are making little headway. We spooked some hinds and he was not interested. We carried on hoping we would be able to track them, but no. A week later we spooked a stag, as we did not see it till we heard it crashing through the bush away from us. Strider froze and refused to budge for ages after. It took a long time to get him comfortable that trip. Is it safe to say that he is just one of those dogs that is not a hunter? Any advice will help. Thanks. It's exactly what I just said in that last one. You can't judge a dog before you've shot a deer over it. And again, in my experience, the vast majority of dogs that I have trained, or I've had a hand in training, have actively hunted like the first deer that they've smelt. And if you've watched the blueprint, you've seen Print doing these finds and keen and winding and tracking on before we even shot a deer. He's just working off the scent and just keen to go. However, it is possible that some dogs are like that, and you're saying, is it safe to say that he's just one of these dogs that is not a hunter? Definitely not at this stage, and it comes back to what I just said, what I was talking about in that last question about Patu. You've got to shoot some deer over that dog, and show them that you're there to hunt them, you're there to kill them. Keep it positive. Keep it super simple too. You talk about we were making little headway, we spooked some high. So I don't know if there's more than one hunter, and the dog's sort of looking to two different people, and that can be confusing for the dog, and it really can be. Early on, it's so good for that dog just to have to worry about one person or get a vibe from one person, and for that one person to be onto it, confident. A lot of it comes from the person. It really does. And the dog does something a little bit unsure, and then the person sees that and gets, oh, you're all right. And then the person's body language changes, and the dog picks up on that, and you start bouncing off each other, and things just go south. You've really got to be confident, stay calm, just execute. If the dog's not playing a massive part early on, just keep your body language relaxed, just keep going. If you're really struggling again, put the dog in behind, or use that different style of hunting And again, it's rare that a dog won't actively hunt right from the start. Super, super rare to do everything correctly and shoot a couple of deer over that dog and show that dog that you're there to hunt these animals and you're the predator, you're going to kill them, and they still won't start up. Very, very rare. So again, if I was in your guys' situation, both of you, and I'd done all my training and I hadn't shot a deer over that dog yet, either of those dogs, and they were acting like that, it wouldn't bother me at all. And in some ways, I'd almost prefer that over a dog that's just rip, shit, and bust, trying to climb all over everything and just take over everything right from the start. Because for an indicating dog, it's generally easier to get drive, to increase drive and confidence as you go than it is sometimes to rein in a dog that's just rip, shit, and bust. Let us know how you go. Let us know if we missed anything, if you want me to cover more on that. Really keen to see you guys up and running. Alex, hi Paul, when's a good age to start doing any of the training? As soon as possible once a pup's 8 weeks old. Don't worry about it before 8 weeks old. As soon as a pup's 8 weeks old, you're into it, man, with part 1. ASAP. As soon as possible. Joshua, pup is around 11 months old now, working on cleaning up range and attentiveness in front a bit more before moving on to skin work in part 5. You're a little bit behind. Pup's 11 months old and you're tidying up range before you move on to part 5. If you haven't watched ahead, watch ahead. Moving on. I've noticed while working on whistle turns and non-communicative turns, she prefers one direction versus the other. We can be walking and she stays at a good range, keeping up with my pace, but when I turn her 180, she tends to do it almost reluctantly and take her time walking back in front of me. When she is back in front, she doesn't keep pace, so I'm constantly having to coax her to move forward. Then, when I turn her again, she's sharp and back in front fast. Should she be moving at my pace no matter what direction we're going? And if so, what's a good strategy to work on this? Well, that is exactly how change of direction is supposed to work. And that's the way we use it, is that the dog's going in the direction in which it wants to go. Early on in blueprint training, that is generally moving away from the house, away from the kennel, headed out for our walk. So we've left the house, we've left the section, or some people that'll be getting out of the car and starting our walk around the park, and the dog's just keen to go, pushing its range. It wants to be right down the back corner of the park, sniffing around in its favourite tree, doing whatever it wants to do. It just wants to go. It just wants to move, and it pulls away. So we turn it around. It pulls away too fast. So we turn it around and go, hey, and that is telling the dog, if you're not going to be attentive and stay close to me and go slow enough, we're going to turn around and walk back to the car. It's like the old, if you don't do this our way, I'm going to turn this car around and we're going back home, you know. It's exactly that. And a big part of that is when you do turn around, the dog's like reluctant. And I don't want to go back. I want to be going forward. That's why it was pushing its range in the first place. That's why you have to use the turn. And it'll walk slow the other way because it's reluctant, because it wants to be going the other way. And when you turn it around, it'll often go fast again. So that's how it works. It'd be nice if it didn't work that way. It'd be nice if you didn't have to turn because your dog was just going nice and slow, and it'd be nice if you did turn. You sort of want it to be reluctant. You want it to go slow. that's creating that contrast. That's showing the dog. And a big part of that, man, is turn around and walk back towards the car, back towards the house for a good distance. And a big turning point here can be that change of direction drill. So some of this probably isn't making that much sense for people who haven't followed the deer dog training blueprint, but turn to change of direction is a huge part of training range. We use it a lot for a lot of things, and it's sort of simple, but it's sort of not either, and it's broken down into quite a few different steps and stages in the blueprint, and explained and demonstrated and gone over for bloody ages. But for Joshua, who's following the blueprint, this will make sense. When you turn the dog around because it was going too fast, and it just does that really reluctant walk in front of you for a while, if it's a really smart dog and it's really highly driven and it keeps really wanting to push its range, and it's a sort of dog that takes a lot of persistence to beat it, sometimes that turn drill, and if you don't do it properly, just turns into a mild inconvenience, and the dog's just like, I'll go fast, then I'll get turned around, we'll walk that way for bugger all, and then we'll turn around again, I'll go fast. And it just turns into this little thing that the dog just deals with and just goes with it. And it just turns into a routine, you're not really getting anywhere. One part of breaking that can be you walk back towards the car or back towards the house for longer. And the length of time that you do it for is until the dog thinks you're not going to turn around again. I hope that makes sense. So, and you can see it. This is a big part of reading a dog and reading a thought is, so let's say with a dog, with Print, when I'm training Print at home there and I leave the section, I'm walking down the side of the road. And I used to do this with boot camp dogs. That I was doing deer dog training boot camps. People would bring me their dog and that they hadn't really trained and had chased deer and had no range and did all this stuff. And I used to put them through a deer dog training boot camp, and I'd train the hell out of them for 6 weeks until I'd have them so you could hunt over them. And some of those dogs had a lot of bad habits, and they'd be trained the wrong way, and they'd walked all over their owners forever, and they had all these different weird little games and strategies on how to beat people, and they thought they were real clever. and I'd leave the section with some of these dogs, start walking up the side of the road there, headed towards the training paddock, and they'd be pushing their range, and I'd turn them, and they'd go, oh yeah, it's all right, and we'd walk back towards the house a bit, and then I'd turn back around, and it'd work a few times, but if I didn't walk back far enough, I'd get into a situation where you're in, and they'd just like turn around, walk real slow for a while, turn back around, they'd go for it again. And you do that a few times, and I could see where it was going, and I'd done it all before, and I go, okay, so we're there, and so you'd and you get to the point where you'd be walking away from the house, the dog would be walking fast, too fast. You'd stand on the long line a couple of times, you'd say slow down, they just keep pushing their range, they're trying to not listen. So you do a turn, and they turn around, you're walking back towards the house, and you can see that anticipating the turn. They're almost walking along, looking back, waiting for you to turn back around so they can take off again the other way. and you just keep walking back towards the house. And you'd see their body language start to change. They'd like waiting for it, and then I'd sort of like, what the heck? And then you just keep walking back. And you'd see their body language change to the point, and they'd sort of get more demoralized, and their head would go down. They're like, holy shit, I think we're actually going all the way back to the house, back to the kennel. And I'd walk them like that for a while, and then I'd turn around. And you'd see their mind start to working. And you start to get their attention. You start breaking up the patterns, and you're messing with them. Like they were messing with you. And then you'd see them, and they'd go to run off, and then they'd sort of slow down and think about it a bit, and they'd start to slow down. That was a big one. And then, obviously, non-communicative turns, making the turns a surprise. And again, that's what I'm saying about looking ahead. If you're at 11 months old and you're working on stuff in part 5, it's really that 7 and 8. Yeah, part 7 and 8, when we get into proper non-communicative training and non-communicative turns, that really start sorting that stuff out in range. But talking about the turn command, turning into that process of the dog just runs backwards and it turns around and runs fast back. It's the amount of time that you walk back. And you can actually see it reading the dog. And it used to be quite funny sometimes. Robert. G'day, Paul. Currently following the blueprint with my 6-year-old lab and her 3-month-old pup. Both are doing well. I plan to hunt fallow, red, and sambar over them. However, I have 3 pet red deer that they have grown up around. They show no interest in the deer at home, which is good, but I'm about to start scent training with my older dog and not sure if I should avoid using red deer skin and just concentrate on fallow to begin with. Interested in your thoughts. And I sort of touched on this really briefly earlier, and it just doesn't matter, man. And we've had a few people like this and that have asked even before buying the blueprint, or they've bought the blueprint and they start to get into some of that stuff that I was talking about with Ryan, with the we talk about that in the blueprint, that it's really important to not be around areas where there's deer and stuff. And some people that have a deer, some people are training a big game indicating dog with the blueprint on a deer farm, and they're like, well, this isn't going to work. But it's, dogs do have a certain amount of situational awareness. And, the classic example I use of this is professional goat hunters that I used to work with. A couple of them had pet goats at home, and the dogs would pay them no attention. And some of these are bailing dogs too, that could sometimes be quite hard, biting goats on the ass, pulling them up, and you actually had to be pretty. Some of those guys had to be pretty hard on their dogs so they didn't turn into goat holding dogs instead of bailing dogs. But what I'm saying is the dogs just differentiate, and you can have deer in the paddock at home. You can have a pet deer. It's like pig. Quite a few pig hunters have pet pigs. And granted, some of them probably have to be quite careful that the wrong dog doesn't get out and in the wrong situation, and next thing you'll be swinging off the pig. But if you just follow everything else in the blueprint, it wouldn't bother me whether you were training with red deer skin or fallow deer skin, or your deer in the paddocks were reds or fallow. I just continue as usual and do all the stuff, and your dogs will differentiate, and it just won't matter, man. It won't be an issue at all. Maybe a tiny bit, but 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100 will just make absolutely no difference to anything that you're doing in the blueprint. Worst case scenario is the first 1 or 2 deer, the dog's sort of like, oh, well, there's a deer, and you shoot it, and the dog goes, okay, sweet. Don't do anything with the deer at home, but every time we're out in the bush, we're trying to kill them, and we get to eat them, and they'll be right into it. And that's that. So, again, thanks to anyone who's ever signed up for the Deer Dog Training Blueprint. I can't do any of this without you guys. We couldn't make these Q&As. I couldn't be making hunting videos. I couldn't be doing any of the stuff I'm going to do. We wouldn't have the inner circle. We wouldn't have any of the stuff, And thanks for listening. If you want to find out more about the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, you can find out more at biggameindicatingdogs.com. Also, Big Game Indicating Dogs on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Facebook and Instagram, there is probably hundreds of posts from people who have trained their dogs with the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, and success stories and photos and epic stories of how their dogs tracked a deer or a chamois for hundreds of meters or kilometers, and all this awesome stuff. Super thankful for anyone who signs up to the blueprint, puts all that hard work in, trains their dog properly, gets out there and actually does it, and then sends in photos for us to post. It's all like it's a pretty cool ecosystem. That's it. Again, apologies for some of these questions being some of these answers being a bit late. We're really ripping in for the year again now, and we want to crank the Q&As. Videos. We're going to be doing tons of hunting this year. Pretty much want to crank everything from here on out for the year. Just had a bit of a break, but when that new Q&A post pops up, throw a whole bunch of questions on it, and I'll hook in. Cheers, guys and girls and dogs and everyone. See you later.